The strangest thing about successful people is that before the world called them geniuses, people called them delusional. Before the millions, before the fame, before the trophies, before the standing ovations, people laughed. They called them unrealistic, crazy, obsessed. And maybe that's the hidden truth behind every extraordinary life, because greatness almost always looks irrational in the beginning. A broke man believing he'll become wealthy, an unknown athlete believing he'll become the greatest in the world. From the outside, it looks ridiculous, until it happens. Every legendary life is lived twice, first in imagination, then in reality. Long before success becomes visible to the world, it exists inside someone's mind. A future nobody else can see, a possibility nobody else believes. A vision so irrational that people mistake it for delusion. But what if that delusion is actually the beginning of greatness? What if the people who change their lives, and sometimes change the world, are simply the people who refuse to abandon their vision before reality catches up? Today, we're going to uncover a pattern that appears over and over throughout history. A pattern shared by champions, entrepreneurs, artists, leaders, and some of the most successful people who ever lived. Because their success didn't begin when they won, it began when nobody believed them. And by the end of this video, you may never look at confidence, failure, or your own future the same way again. Brazil, 1950. The entire nation was in shock. Brazil had just suffered one of the most devastating defeats in football history. Across the country, people cried. Among them was a former footballer sitting in his home, devastated by what he had just witnessed. His young son watched silently. The boy was only 9 years old. His family was poor. He didn't even own a real football. Sometimes he practiced by kicking a sock stuffed with newspapers. Yet, as he watched tears run down his father's face, he made a promise. A promise so absurd that nobody should have taken it seriously. He looked at his father and said, "Don't cry, Papa. I will win the World Cup for you." Think about that. A poor child, no status, no connections, no evidence, no reason for anyone to believe him. If someone had heard that promise that day, they probably would have smiled politely, maybe even laughed. Because impossible dreams always sound ridiculous at first. But that boy never let go of the vision. Years later, the world would know him by another name, Pelé. And he didn't just win one World Cup, he won 3, more than anyone else in history. The promise that sounded delusional became reality. But Pelé wasn't an exception. He was a pattern. Because history is filled with people who saw a future long before anyone else could. The real question is, if extraordinary success begins with extraordinary belief, why do most people lose that belief? The answer isn't lack of talent. It isn't lack of intelligence. It isn't even lack of opportunity. The answer is pain. Not physical pain, psychological pain. The pain of embarrassment, the pain of rejection, the pain of looking foolish, the pain of hearing people say, "Be realistic, grow up." That's never going to happen. Most dreams don't die because they are impossible. They die because the dreamer gets tired of defending them. And over time, most people surrender. They lower their ambitions to match their environment. They trade possibility for acceptance. They trade vision for comfort. Because comfort feels safe. But comfort has a hidden price. It quietly steals your future. Years later, people wonder why their lives never changed. But the answer is simple. They stopped believing before the results arrived. Think about a young man who kept saying he would become a world champion. Long before the championships, long before the fame, long before the millions. Even when he was collecting welfare checks. Living with uncertainty, training in a small gym. He kept making predictions that sounded completely insane. He said he would become champion. Not maybe, not hopefully. He said it like it had already happened. People laughed. People mocked him. People called him arrogant, delusional, detached from reality. But while everyone focused on his words, he was already becoming the person he believed he would be. Every day he trained. Every day he improved. Every day he moved one step closer to the future he had already seen in his mind. That man was Conor McGregor. The same man people once called delusional would eventually become a UFC champion and one of the biggest stars in combat sports history. And whether people loved him or hated him, one thing became impossible to deny. He believed long before there was evidence. But belief wasn't the secret. The secret was that he worked as if that future was already guaranteed. Day after day, year after year. That's what separates dreamers from achievers. Not belief alone, but belief backed by obsession. Because this is where many people get confused. They hear stories like these and think success is about positive thinking. It isn't. Positive thinking alone changes nothing. You can stare into a mirror for 20 years and tell yourself you're a millionaire, but without action, nothing changes. Reality doesn't reward wishes. It rewards action. The people who achieve extraordinary things are rarely just dreamers. They're obsessed. They think about their goals constantly. They learn. They take action. They fail. Then they get up and continue. Again and again and again. That's why there is a massive difference between fantasy and delusional self-belief. Fantasy says, I hope it happens. Delusional self-belief says, I'll make it happen. And that's the difference. One waits for circumstances to change. The other goes to work. And eventually, the work creates proof. But the real secret goes even deeper. And it may be the most important lesson of all. Because before you can change your life, you have to change your identity. Most people wait for success before believing in themselves. The high achievers do the opposite. They believe first. Think about how many people say these phrases to themselves every day. I'm not talented. I'm unlucky. I'm just average. The frightening thing is that the brain listens. Every time you repeat a story about yourself, you strengthen it. Every time you tell yourself who you are, your mind searches for evidence to support it. Which means the opposite is also true. When someone begins saying, my current situation is temporary, I am becoming stronger, I am becoming the person I need to be, their brain begins searching for evidence for that story too. Their posture changes, their decisions change, their standards change, their actions change, and eventually their life changes. Because your identity acts like a magnet. It constantly pulls your behavior toward itself. If you see yourself as average, you'll act average. If you see yourself as someone capable of greatness, you'll start behaving differently. Not overnight, but consistently. and consistency changes everything. This is why elite athletes visualize victory. This is why top performers guard their mindset. They understand a truth most people never discover. Your future is built by the story you repeat to yourself every day. That's the real power of delusional self-belief. It isn't pretending. It isn't ignoring reality. It's refusing to let your current reality become your permanent identity. At the beginning, every great dream looks delusional. The future champion looks arrogant. The future success story looks foolish. Until one day, reality catches up. Then the exact same people who laughed begin calling them talented, lucky, gifted, an overnight success. But they weren't seeing the years of invisible belief, the years of rejection, the years spent building a future nobody else could see. And maybe that's the real secret. The world doesn't belong to the most realistic people. It belongs to the people bold enough to believe in a bigger future long enough to create it. Because sometimes the only difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one is that one person refused to quit. When everyone doubted them, when the evidence disappeared, when progress slowed, when reality gave them every reason to stop, they continued. And eventually, reality had no choice but to catch up. Because every revolutionary idea sounds ridiculous in the beginning. Remember, every legendary life begins as a ridiculous idea. Every transformation begins as an invisible belief. Every extraordinary achievement starts inside the mind of someone willing to look foolish before they look successful. The question is not whether your dream seems unrealistic today. The question is whether you'll keep believing long enough to give reality a chance to catch up. Because one day, the thing everyone called delusional may become the thing they call inevitable. Thank you for watching English Stories That Change Lives. If this story helped you, please subscribe and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Keep practicing your English, keep believing in your future, and I'll see you in the next story.